and viewers. We are in with the next edition of Shorts, and I've got a very special guest with me today. So Judhajit, or Jeet as he's called, is the head of HR operations and customer service for ICICI Prudential in India. And of course, he's been a long-standing sort of professional in the industry. Many of you may know him. Many of our listeners and followers actually may know him already. But I think the thing I want to introduce him is why he takes a very practical sort of an approach to life, if I may call it that, and also to his profession. So he's one of the more practical, down-to-earth HR professionals I have met in my career. Given that he's at a very senior position, I think he still is very, a viewpoint which brings in all the concepts, but ultimately it boils down to doing things on a day-to-day basis and a weekly basis, which is what I like, Jeet, about you. So with that introduction, let me just launch into our conversation. Our listeners do know that the Shorts series is a series of sort of crisp, short conversations about 20 to 30 minutes on a topical kind of an issue. So we are going to talk to Jeet today about the challenges and the issues, and particularly with respect to the HR function in the last 16 to 18 months, where COVID and the whole pandemic thing has hit us. So Jeet, from your perspective, just to tee this off, what are the key challenges or issues you've seen for the function itself, as we've gone through the last 16 to 18 months? What's been your sort of viewpoint and experience?
Right. So thank you, Bhuvan, for the generous words, and a pleasure to be here. And I'll share my perspective in terms of what I have experienced personally post the pandemic. And I will try and, obviously we have the benefit of hindsight now to, try to put some of the actions that we did in a framework. So if I were to go back in time, obviously the whole, it's not as if it came as a shock. There were warning signals coming from February onwards. So the need for, as obviously we got news of COVID spreading in China and Italy, certain protocols started coming in place, like sanitization of hands, wearing of masks in offices, and rostering of people. So some of these were already in progress in the month of February. Travel being curtailed, large gatherings being curtailed. So it wasn't as if overnight it came. But when the decision for full lockdown came, that obviously was a bit of a surprise. Automatically, if I were to look back today and say in preceding the lockdown, if somebody said that, would it be possible for companies to operate at scale in a lockdown environment? I wouldn't have imagined. But so obviously, the couple of weeks immediately after the lockdown was a big challenge.
Right.
Because not everybody had access to laptops. Not everybody had connectivity at home. So not everybody was geared to work at home, right? So call centers. So we are an essential service. And as an essential service, the big challenge for us is to make sure that our branches were functional and we were able to provide all the services to our customers, which meant our employees had to provide service. And we had to make sure that they had access to all the internet facing applications from their residences so that they could patch on calls and all of that. So, the first 2-3 weeks was really a blur in terms of just, and HR was driving it along with the administration teams, and we have technology infrastructure. So 3 teams were coordinating, and which largely were the technology infrastructure and technology teams, HR and administration. And technology infrastructure and administration rolling to me along with HR. So if I can say, the entire teams, the help desk teams, they were working overnight just to make sure that everybody got access to laptops, everybody got access to internet connections. The technology team, of course, supported in making sure that technology applications were available, remote help desks, because you could not travel out if you wanted to get your laptop configured. So all these were existing technologies. Microsoft Teams, for example, which were there, available. It's not that these weren't there. It's just that we were not using them. So the first 2-3 weeks just went in that. My learning from that process was that while yes, we had a Apex team, the whole agenda was being driven by the HR team because it was concerning employees.
Right.
So if I were to look back and say I would define it as a step up moment for HR. Because everybody was now looking at HR to take initiative, provide the leadership, and make things happen so that employees could, one, not just feel secure, but also be productive.
Right.
So all these enablements had to be orchestrated. And that was the role that the HR team across organizations, I'm not talking about ICICI Pru, I think if I were to talk about all the large corporations, pretty much the HR teams took the lead in making it happen, along with support of the other teams. But if I were to say, HR played the role of a sutradhar in a sense, and took the initiative and played the leadership role. So that was one big learning. The second part I would think is immediately after that, because cases of COVID was still not coming because it was full lockdown, right? But immediately when you gone into May, and so cases started coming in. And so then the whole aspect of policies to support employees on health, safety, and well-being came in. So that was the second part. And that is purely an HR domain, right? So whether it's teleconsultation with doctors, and this was learning on the go because people needed to do COVID testing. So how do you do COVID testing? So tie-ups with providers to enable COVID testing to be done. As you got into it, 1 month into it, and you took feedback from employees, people talked about stress. So automatically, the policy support in terms of giving telecounseling for anxiety management for people came in. Because a lot of people cramped up in small houses, working late hours, internet connection. So one challenge is, for example, if in office you could do something in 5 minutes because of network speed. If your resident did not give you that, or because you had to also do domestic responsibilities, it meant days elongated. So you were working till 8 o'clock, 10 o'clock in the night, and people started complaining about stress. So how to reduce it, how to mitigate it. So policy enablements came, like silent hours, giving a support, making sure, a policy that you should not be disturbing people with meetings beyond a certain timeline. So the point I'm trying to make is that it was a lot of learning on the go, and you had to be improvising as you went along. And there were two things stand out, is really the concern on health, safety, and well-being, which was always there from a physical safety perspective. But I think this pandemic brought out the mental health aspect out of the closet, if I were to say, because that is not something that we openly talked about in organizations. Physical safety is always, like manufacturing or any other organization, there is always a lot of emphasis on physical safety. And even in a services organization like ours, road safety was always a thing. Fire safety is a concern. But we never really talked about mental health so much. So that came very strongly. So which is definitely a welcome thing from my perspective. And policy enablements to support it, more importantly. And I think it also led to new kind of culture getting spawned in terms of all these meetings that we're doing, right? So it became quite a norm to first check in with people. How are you? How's it going? Are you safe? And before you start the meeting also. And normally you wouldn't really do that, right? So that part of the thing, I think we talk about, it was a bit of a challenge if I think about it. In my role also, at one level, you have to step up the urgency, get a lot of things done. You have to make sure that the business is running. You have to make sure that customers are being serviced. You have to make sure sales are happening. So there is a what do I say, pressure which is there because obviously businesses slowed down because of the macroeconomic environment, and the customers have their requirements. At the same time, employees have their requirements. How do you balance two competing priorities? That required balancing. And I think the learning there was that, while you have to be able to juggle with, if I were to say, compassion at one level, but at the same time, you have to also have pace setting. because both have to go hand in hand.
Both have to go hand in
And
hand.
that, because at the end of the day, there is a business to be run and there are employees to be taken care of. But one defining feature, I would say, which became the hallmark, at least in conversations I've had with my peers across all organizations, is that the focus came back on employees and people.
Right.
While of course customer service was there, profits have to be done. Whether it's the board, whether it's shareholders, whether it's investors, across the people realize that you need a fit and healthy workforce. So every conversation, even today, starts with what's happening on employees. And people check in on these things. Right now, it's on vaccinations, for example.
Right.
How many people? Because people have realized that unless you have a healthy workforce, I mean, we always knew it, you can't have a productive workforce. So I think it's changed the discourse totally and made the workplace more, and you'll resonate with it because in traditional industrial relations, it's always been the norm, like we discussed the other time, to really talk about people from a people perspective. But I think, so we saw this aspect of it coming to the forefront, which wasn't really perhaps as much there because things had become a bit more transactional over the last 15 years, particularly in service organizations. HR played a more transactional role. So right now, as HR was being called upon, I mean, you do your hiring numbers, you make sure that you manage process.
Right.
You don't really emote, empathize, talk to people. So while it was done over virtual mediums, not physically, definitely the tone and nature of the conversations changed. So I would say that, and I think it would be a trend going forward because this is a big change. So the workplace will become more humanized. Though these are my opening thoughts, really, if I have to think about.
Let me pick up on that last piece you talked about, the whole thing about, the discourse changing towards a more humane workplace and, a little more, let's say, words like empathy, compassion, etc. are being much more talked about in the last, few months kind of a thing. So if I take the HR function as a whole, and what you said, which is that in many organizations it had become, a little more transactional and process-led and so on and so forth, and there's a need to shift to the other side. So from a mindset point of view, I were to say, what are the top 2 or 3 things you see for the function that mindset either has changed or necessarily needs to change in a particular direction? What would those 2, 3 things be apart from the humane part? Are there more, practical things you could say, okay, this is what I see that the HR has shifted to or is likely to shift to. What would those 3, 4 things?
Right. No, so there is a, if I were to talk about the role of HR, you go back to the Dave Ulrich model, right? HR as one is an employee champion. Right. But more than an employee champion, I would say, I would take that part and say, here, and it straddles between being an employee channel and a business partner, essentially, is the role of HR as a helper, providing support to employees. If I were to use a doctor or a nurse, what is your role really? Your role is to help an ailing patient, either cure and support, right? So both play the role of a helper in a sense. The doctor role comes in because the treatment is policy. So I would use the analogy of the doctor role as you have to have an enabling policy framework. Right. Because if a policy framework doesn't allow it, then nobody can implement it. And that's the role of HR leadership and the management team. And of course, with the explicit support and of the CEO. Right. And that, I think, large organizations are very fortunate that they have the resources and the leadership vision to provide that. Nobody questioned that why are you spending money, for example, to provide, doctor teleconsultation free. Or nobody questioned that, if you have to redesign my offices to put up plexiglass or air purifiers to keep employees safe. I mean, there are cost elements, right? And this is a time when business is already slow. So I think where CEOs and business leaders have stepped in is that they had the foresight and the vision to realize and the wisdom that these are absolutely necessary. So HR did not have to answer questions. Normally in good times, these can be, questioned at various levels. Are these really necessary? I think the change in the discourse to suddenly sense, okay, I'm going to spend a significant amount of money in terms of redesigning offices, putting in place policy frameworks, vaccination. A lot of organizations are doing it free. Not that people need it. I mean, the cost of vaccine is not significant. It's more the what do I say? How you want to come across. And I think one very important thing, and again, I mean, not that I'm particularly supportive of it. There has been definitely in the last few months, especially in the second wave, and I'll touch on it because you see a lot of organizations competing to talk about what they're doing for families of employees who have deceased.
Right.
I mean, personally, I'm against that kind of jockeying to get media coverage. But what if you go through the messaging, you'll find that companies are trying to support through policies which touch the employee's life or the family of them. It could be education support, medical support till the date of retirement. So what I'm trying to say, the emotional component in the way you frame, say even benefits, because there was a time when we talked about compensation on any payout to be a fixed amount. But when you, now if I say, I mean, just to give an example, if I say I were to give you, say 10 lakhs as a benefit, as opposed to saying, I will give you full education bill, and it will not even cost 10 lakhs, right? Or medical support. So you may give a far more higher amount in terms of your life insurance cover or whatever other benefits you're paying in terms of salaries. But the moment you frame it as, I'm giving you education till you, full education for your children, or frame it for full health insurance coverage or employment, then the kind of emotional connect that also gets created with the families of the deceased is very different than giving a full lump sum. I think, so what I'm trying to say is that people are, in a sense, rediscovering the value of these emotional hooks with the workforce. And therefore, to go back, I think I mean, not to say that the transactional part of HR, which is getting more self-service now, right? Because if you look at it, nobody's talking to an HR guy to ask what my leave is, or for various things that you would probably, you know, either you outsource it or you do it online now through apps. So two things that have happened clearly, if I have to summarize. One is definitely like customer service has moved to self-help. Employee service has also moved to employee self-service. It's been happening, but it's now every process where employees can have what information they need to know will be available on the website or the app or the company intranet. So they don't have to go or seek out somebody for getting information, and they should be able to do a lot of the transactions on their own without needing the HR as an intermediary. So what is the step up for HR? If you're not going to be just a provider, because you were hoarding information earlier or sitting on information which you could not do, that role is now out, right? And administration is not through people, it's through technology. So it becomes standardized, right? So technology doesn't, so long you configure the process well, I mean, even now, yeah, it will work. So, and you are using now, experimenting with artificial intelligence or chatbots to make sure queries can be answered by without necessarily. So what is the role here that HR has to do? It has to be a high level skill which a chatbot can't do. And that's where I'll bring in the whole aspect of at least being able to be a good listener, to be a good counselor. I mean, at the first step is somebody just be a sounding board. You know, if I were to think about it, at least that is hygiene. You have to be available to people to listen to. And the second part, obviously, is when you start counseling people, because I'm realizing that people need this more at work. And of course, the higher level would be even coaching people. But definitely one important skill that I think a generation of HR would need in today's environment, apart from being able to migrate processes digitally and use emerging technologies to digitize and provide better, if I were to call, employee experience. And if I draw from the customer side, you talk of superior customer experience, right? And that is being done through being proactive, using AI, ML and big data to be able to do that. And so similarly on the employee side, the employer life cycle, how can it be digitized, and how can you create certain in certain moments of truth, that experience which enables people to get a superior experience is something. One side of it will come through, and that's already happening. But this other part, which was somewhere getting neglected, which is really the human part of it, because people are social, they need that human connect, they need that engagement, whether it's going to be physical, face to face, or through Zooms or meetings like this. That will be a very important skill to have. And that's how I think HR can evolve and I would say distinguish themselves as a value-added service provider. So you don't have to tie up with a counselor necessarily. You built a skill because you needed that skill.
No, in fact, interesting you make that point, because I started my career in a manufacturing plant, and I remember that in the first year, one of the big learnings I had from my manager was saying that you need to learn the art of listening and having a good conversation. And I think that's like 50% of your job. Basically he said 50% of your job is about having conversations with people and listening to them. And if you learn that, and so, so many of us who started, our careers in those kind of environments. But you're right that, somewhere in the last 15 or 20 years, I think some of that got diluted. And, personally, at least my view is that, apart from being transactional, it impacts both the willingness as well as the skill. So one is the skill gap and, how do you build the skill? But also the willingness has gone away because you need attention to be able to listen and have conversations. That I think many of us, given the way the world has gone with, many things, the distractions are so many that our ability to concentrate and actually focus on deep listening and having a good conversation has actually, gone away. We are, half the time people are looking at their phones, getting distracted with all sorts of other stuff. So I think, in some ways you can almost say that it's a good thing that we've, come back to what humanity is in some ways, or, humanization of the function. But let me pick on one other thing, you talked about, Jeet. While the role of HR will change and this thing, do you think that this is, and you mentioned that this is likely to be the trend in the future. I keep hearing two things, right? So one, I hear that, yes, this is something which has come to stay. And because people have had their own personal experiences, they will not forget it so easily. There's another school of thought which says that, yeah, we've gone through a blip, but in 1 year's time, we will revert back to exactly the way we were and, forget all of this stuff and just go back to doing or being the way we were. What's your view on that? How will that pan out in your sense?
So it will definitely be a shift. How much is the shift is a matter of debate. I can't also predict it. But definitely one thing one can say is that the future workplace will be a hybrid model. And there are business reasons for it. There is absolutely no merit when you can have large number of employees who can also work from home, that you want everybody to work from office. Because the work from home is an efficient model. It's a flexible model. One, it will save you office rentals, right? Cost of space. Just imagine, right? Plus the flexibility. And adopting it would create a more inclusive workplace. Because right now, if you think about a lot of women drop out of the workforce because of the lack of flexibility. Because commute time, especially in big cities like Bombay, I mean, if you're taking, most people live in the suburbs, and if your office is somewhere even if it's not in Nariman Point, but even in BKC, for example, you're still traveling 2 hours every day. You can't balance both family and work effectively. A blended model, a hybrid workplace allows you to do that. It's not that, again, it's not to say that remote working is new, right? I mean, outsourcing has been happening for the last 20 years. I mean, a lot of processes move from US and Europe to India and across the world. So people are used to remote working. But this aspect of working from home is very new. It's not really so common, right? So, I mean, one interesting insight I had since, I'm sitting in New York now, is that construction industry in the US has been booming because people are getting their houses reconfigured to work from home. So you're creating an office space for yourself. Because you never thought about the home being an office, right? So contractors have a lot of demand and they're not easy to get here. because you have to reconfigure your office. I mean, no, home to work as home offices for maybe a family of 4, because you need separate places for everyone to concentrate and work, right? So in my mind, the big thing will be really a hybrid workplace is definitely the future. Whether it's going to be 90% work from home or 10% work from home, I can't say. But if you were to put some thoughts on it, individual contributor roles where you work alone, mostly like a programmer, or in our case in life insurance, underwriters. They basically look at cases, right? And they have to decision a case, or credit decisions where you work alone. You have files and you take a decision. Right. These are very amenable to work from home. Right. And in fact, they have large amounts of women there. Almost 70-80% of underwriters are women, because we are able to offer them the flexibility to work from home. And this is something we started some time back before the pre-pandemic, but it's now caught on, right? So any individual contributor role can technically, non-customer facing, can technically work from home. And I think that will happen. Then there'll be roles which are customer facing, where the role that I have to serve the customer at the branch, I have to serve the customer. That will be always work from office. Then there'll be certain roles which are, say, managerial or leadership roles, which will be blended, work from office, work from home. And my thought on that is that certainly some of the processes that require sorry, one moment. Sorry, I don't know where I left it, Bimal. There was a bit of noise again.
You're talking about processes and some of the processes which will require.
Yeah. So I think some of the roles that require quasi-managerial or managerial and leadership roles, they will be a blended between work from office, work from home, because my personal view is that there is a huge value in physical meetings, because it's very difficult to build trust. And trust is an essential ingredient for any kind of collaboration, which is again an essential ingredient for innovation. If you want to brainstorm on ideas, especially new recruits who haven't been, know people, because we are used as human beings to watch for non-verbal signals. Right. So while we are evolving to make out what others are feeling and thinking based on their tone, based on maybe their head movement, because that's the only visible part, right? The non-verbal cues that we read very well in a group setting, those cannot be used in this kind of a setup, right? So while of course we will get more skilled at reading the message behind the tone, I don't see that being the norm, because getting people together to brainstorm on real problem solving, locking up 4 or 5 people in a room and solving a problem for 3 hours and ideating, it's very different from trying to do it 3 hours on a Zoom. It's fatiguing.
It doesn't work
It doesn't work. And even if you can make technology and whiteboards and all of that, I mean, it can be done as a one-off thing or two-off thing or not required. But I will not take away that we can ever move to 100% work from home. But neither I see 100% work from office. Where it will settle is a matter of debate. So the future of work is going to be different. So I think that's the moot point. And that has implications for 2 things. It has implications for culture, what we value and what we don't value. So definitely I see a lot of efficiency improvements with the flexibility, the access to a wider workforce. But it will also, in my mind, lead us to new kinds of organization design, perhaps, because the traditional command and control structure that we required, levels and hierarchy, will have to be rethought. It's not that I have an answer yet, but I definitely see delayering as something that will come. So organizations will become more, the moment to delayer, you will also become more agile. It's possible to do. A lot of things were done in the past, for example. Say the efficiency improvement that you get from this 4 hours of commute time going down, for example. And also a lot of things being digital, as he talked about, moving to self-service. That will free up a lot of time.
Right.
Like we said in the past, outsourcing a lot of the HR activities will free up time for HR to do value-added services. So the question that was, okay, the willingness to come, listen and counsel, right? But also with the skill. And where do you get the time? Because without adding the workforce, because you'll migrate a lot of work, which was otherwise being done for information exchange to self-service. So definitely I see that health and safety, and especially psychological safety and psychological aspect will become more a discourse. And I think paying attention to it, because we really don't know today. We can count number of sick days when people are not physically well. But I mean, technically, we don't have a policy to say, okay, you are having depression and therefore you are on sick leave. I mean, it's not the norm today, right? So things like that will probably become, and we'll become a more. I'm very positive about that. We'll become a more inclusive workplace. We'll become a more human workplace, and it shall be definitely a more delayered and agile workforce. That has huge implications for productivity. So adoption of technology, delayering, inclusion, I think these are the themes which will emerge more. And there is already a push for it, but it will accelerate it. Again, it's not to say that digitization did not exist. So the way I like to frame it is, this pandemic will accelerate a trend which was perhaps not there. It will lead to more innovation, because if I'm Zoom today as a company, I will try to figure out what are the restrictions, what are the challenges that meetings like these have, and I'll try to substitute with solutions. So more money will flow in, and that will lead to better technology, and better technology will lead to better and more adoption you have. You will also get richer customer feedback. Right now, one thing I'm noticing, for example, we are doing it. We just commissioned a survey amongst employees to understand, for example, how many employees would want to work from home. We've asked them specific questions. So would you like to work from home? Would you like to work from office? Maybe we've asked you want to work from home in the same city, or you want to work from a different city? So we are just collating the feedback, because right now I don't even know. I mean, so we have to prepare for reopening. Now, if I find, I mean, my senses, I did it with the HR team. I mean, 80%, 90% want a hybrid workplace. Only 10% want a purely work from home or work from. So what am I learning there? People want a blend. People don't want to an extreme situation. I will only work from home and never see anybody except in Zoom meetings, or I will only work from office and not have the flexibility. So again, I mean, I'm not getting nitpicking on whether it's 80, 90. All I'm saying is it's going to be a hybrid workplace. There is definitely going to be adoption of technology at scale. That will lead to better emerging technology. So a lot of the transactions and services, and maybe also certain value-added services like using AI ML will now move to self-service. That will free up. And technically, now HR, if it doesn't acquire these skills, then it will become a laggard. So I think the role of HR in terms of, and I think it's true for all managers. You cannot be a command and control manager if you are not an empathetic manager, if you are not able to also do a certain level of counseling. And how do you, for example, I mean, in a room, just imagine, Vimal, if you are sitting in a room with 20 people, you can take a very tasky style. Right? Can you take a tasky style in a Zoom meeting?
Absolutely.
It's like a whimper.
Almost not.
Right. Supposing, I mean, it's also disadvantages for people. Right? How you'll be shouting in a Zoom meeting doesn't help. Right? Raising a voice. Right? You can create that what do I say? Sense of urgency in a team meeting. So one input I got from our customer service head was, see, this is a real challenge. If 40 telecallers are there on the floor and there is a change you want to talk about, what do? You call a huddle. You say, everybody get up, okay, get together.
Absolutely.
And I address the whole floor, right? And I say, look, these are the 3 things we are doing, and I explain it. Everybody, I can make out by looking at people's expressions as I'm scanning the room, who's got it, who's not got it, question answers then and there, right? But now, everybody's sitting at home. So we were talking about this bite-sized learning things. We haven't found a solution to quickly disseminating knowledge, except through structured sessions, right? Digitally. It helps, but my ability to receive feedback from my team to be able to pinpoint intervention is definitely impaired.
Right.
That we'll have to think about how to. I mean, technology doesn't solve that problem. So I've rambled a bit here, but I think these are.
Yeah. So before I go to the last question with you, I think maybe to what you said, I'd add a couple of things. I think just to bring that on. So one is, in addition to all the stuff you said, I think I believe that two things will, in addition, change as I talk to other companies as well. So one is that our ability to pay attention to the right things. And when I say right things, obviously each environment will have different right things, in customer service or in managing employees or whatever. I think somehow I sense that post the pandemic, people will be a little more discerning about what do they pay attention to. For example, my relationship with my superior or my relationship with my team, or how do I deal with an individual, or so I certainly see that there's likely to be a shift towards a little more reflective, a little more paying attention to the right things kind of a mindset at the leadership level particularly, and perhaps at all levels kind of a thing. That's one shift I'm hoping to see, and I do see that people are starting to talk about it. The other shift which I suspect will happen, and I don't know whether it will happen, as you said, totally halfway, etc., is this whole issue of people starting to make choices on a wider set of factors. You see, career choices are very often made on a certain set of factors. I think that set of factors is fundamentally going to shift in people's mind. And I think therefore that whole issue of how do you attract talent, how do you retain talent, how do you manage attrition, and you mentioned some of those, right, in terms of where do I want to work from and all that. But I think somewhere for a lot of people, the equation has shifted in their head. So instead of looking at items A, B, C, D for my career, I will certainly start asking a very different set of questions, whether this employer is going to provide me, E, F, G, H, and then maybe A becomes less important and B becomes less important. But anyway, those are, some of the things I am also seeing as we go along kind of thing. But let me, come to last. So if I ask you, Jeet, what have been two of your personal learnings, and for you as a senior leader, in the industry, of course, but even otherwise in HR, what would you say have you learned personally, in this period?
Right. Yeah. So I mean, see, personally for me, the biggest learning, if I were to look back, right, I cannot overemphasize the importance of micro planning.
Right.
If you want to get execution done, right? So, for example, this whole business of rollout, making sure that from the beginning I talked about laptops in place, getting people internet access. We started tracking then who's got COVID, who's not got COVID. So all of this requires detailed information from employees, and we didn't have a system set up for doing it, right? We had to get it from individuals. So because if you don't have information who's got COVID, how do you respond to it in a timely manner? So by the time it comes up from an employee reporting to his manager, so we use the hierarchy very well.
Right.
So each manager was tasked with the responsibility to be in touch with their employee group, and make sure that they were checking in daily and reporting back to a central state level SPOC, who would then collect the information. And all of this was being done manually to start with, but it gave you real-time information of what's going on. Because without real-time information, you cannot act. You cannot create policy in vacuum, right? So once you start getting real-time information, then these are the issues.
Right.
So the 2 points I learned about it: the importance of engagement at hyperscale, if I were to use it, and doing the micro planning,
right,
to be able to make sure that things move, because there are so many things that can go wrong in execution, right? So whether it's vaccination, for example, I'll give an example. Right now, in the big cities, it's not a problem, but we have 5-7 people in smaller locations. So we said, okay, and there is vaccine hesitancy also. People want a different kind of vaccine. So if Covishield is available, somebody wants Covaxin. and somebody says, no, I want to wait for Sputnik.
Uh,
So we improvised, and we've said that now that, okay, we'll follow hub and spoke model for vaccination. So because at the end of the day, one option is that, okay, you go and get vaccinated and get reimbursed, but we want you to facilitate, because ultimately your safety is my business also, right? And it's from a productivity perspective, nothing else, because the other risk issue is that even if you're not vaccinated, not only it's not about yourself, because you can also infect other colleagues or customers, right? So it's in my interest as an organization to also facilitate it for you beyond the humanitarian and the compassionate angle. So all of this requires real-time information and listening more carefully and attentively to all the stakeholders involved, whether it's through surveys or whether through one-on-one communication, which gets filtered up. I think that's been a big value for me. So now, if you were to talk about, see, one way to do it is the crowdsourcing of policies, but then you might get popular choice. Again, you're not running a democracy here. But the point I'm trying to say is that unless you have real input from the ground, your policy framework may, I think it has re-emphasized the need, in my mind, the importance of micro-planning and real-time feedback and collecting information from the ground. That's one part of it. From an execution perspective, I will say. The second learning, if I were to say, not that it wasn't there, but it's been a very interesting conundrum. This whole thing I talked about, pace setting at one level, and compassion at the same. Is it possible? Is it possible to do both? I would say yes. Because this is always like it's seen as a competing.
As a bit of a competing thing, correct?
It seems like a competing agenda, right? I mean, to me, this is going to be the organization norm. I won't. How to balance competing priorities, because there is a crisis, and at the same time you have to support the customer, because ultimately we are all in business for the customer. You can't say employees first and customers. So the ability to flex and create find solutions to these challenges, I think, and it's possible and doable, and that's what organizations have done. So I think that has been that's here to stay. I think every time we look at something now, we'll have to make sure that we're balancing both interests, and I think the sensitization on that has definitely gone up, and we've all realized that it's possible to do. And moving forward, I think every business is all about finally about productivity, right? Doing more with less. So to that extent, what the pandemic has taught, and I think that stretch goals are possible in everything. So if, for example, if somebody, and let's take a hypothetical example, Vimal. If somebody were to say before the lockdown, can you do 100% work from home? None of us would have been in a position to say it, right? So what it does is, I think it shatters certain myths that if you were to flip the argument and see if it works. Now it may rest somewhere else, but it's possible to think 180-degree opposite. Right? And if you do, and I think what it brings out is the ingenuity of the human race in adapting to these challenges. Yeah, it's taken some time. But what it does is it demolishes lots of myths in your mind. Aise nahi hona chahiye, ye nahi ho sakta. Because this is a living example of what all organizations are, what we've been able to do. Yeah, it's had its own costs. Right. Some people who are, I mean, since you brought to those 2 points, I think people who are more self-managed, better at self-management, have done exceedingly well in this environment. They haven't required external stimulus, right? Because at the end of the day, they've been able to be very productive without needing a office to go to and having a manager on there. But people who need that stimulus have struggled, right? So Obviously, every change will throw up some winners and some losers, if I say. But I'm saying that again, that's a temporary phenomenon. It's a question of new solutions, policies, technology evolving to help everybody come onto an equal keel. Right? Some people, a certain set of people are advantaged. Certain personalities of people were advantaged in a work from office model. You typically talk about charismatic leadership as a theme, right? What charisma? The charisma doesn't matter in a Zoom setting, right? How do you demonstrate charisma? You can't stand up on stage and, right? So point I'm trying to make is that the context, so the model of leadership that we've been familiar with, and we typically go for, right? Even in, is obviously going through a rethink here, right? People who have done exceedingly well in these environments are not necessarily the prototype of whom you would call the model leader in your mind, right? So those traditionally, right? So what I'm trying to get at is that it is an opportunity to reflect in terms of flipping every single belief system that you have. That there is a counter proposal. You have to figure out what is best for you in your organization context. And I think if you haven't learned this from the pandemic, I think since you asked me what has been your defining lesson, I think for me the defining lesson is that this is one event which has completely turned the world upside down.
Right.
So in every business situation, every problem, you can technically put a totally contrarian perspective and try to wrestle with that. And that should be the biggest learning that all of us should embrace. That as we move forward, can we flip every belief that we have to say that can this work or not work, and debate through it. And that process of self-reflection and collective judgment would become very, to me, that is the single biggest learning we should take away, is my view.
No, great. So, Jeet, this has been, lovely conversation. I'm sure we can have much more longer conversations about this topic, and I think it will continue to, play on our minds in many different ways, and hopefully, organizations, individuals, all of us will also adapt to, become both better human beings and professionals, through this pandemic. Because I think these are, I see them as once in a lifetime opportunities for change. And I think if we, like you rightly pointed out, I think if we don't take lessons from it and adapt, then we've lost a very good opportunity to change, both organizations and individuals. But thank you very much for your time.
So, Bimal, one last point I'll make, since you alluded to it and I missed talking about it, I think I want to make a mention. What's also been very heartening is how people have stepped in to help each other. Right. And so we've actually started telling people also, if you need help, ask your peers, ask your manager. Don't hesitate. Because see, sometimes it's very difficult to understand what you're going through if you don't talk about it. So one of the things I think it's okay to ask for help, to making that a part of since we talked about what does empathy or compassion mean finally? I mean, empathy and compassion doesn't mean necessarily that I mean, of course I'll check in with you, but if you don't report it to me, it just becomes easier for me. So I need help, right? Whatever be that help. And the good news is that people support. Right. So I think to that extent, we talked about is what in operational terms, what does it mean? Operational terms, it means is if I need support and help, I have colleagues who will provide me that help.
And I can ask for it. And I can
ask for it. And it's okay to ask for it. And it's like, being in, you're in class with a lot of people, you are scared to ask a question because you feel people will judge you. And here, if you ask for help in a work setting, that means you don't know, or it's not okay to ask for it because you'll be seen as weak or whatever other mindsets you may have about it. I think it's okay to ask for help because ultimately we are all in the same boat and we have to help each other to succeed. It's brought that out. Nobody can be a superstar. This is a collective team effort. And I think the pandemic has really taught us that. And I think we should take away that.
No, that's a good point you make. And it's a great point, Jeet. And I see that in many, many, many places, certainly even in personal experience, but also hearing from other leaders like you kind of a thing. So great. thank you again for this conversation and time. It's been lovely, and I'm sure our viewers will sort of really enjoy this, because I think this has been a very, how do I put it, not just a practical conversation, but I think also a thoughtful conversation, in the sense that, you know, it at least points to some of points about for the HR function and for leaders to reflect on, and hopefully, you know, carry back some things which they can implement in their daily, you know, work and workplaces kind of thing. So thank you very much for that. Appreciate that, Jeet.
Thank you.
As
Thank
usual,
you.
you know, lovely having a conversation with you.